Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'd like to share with you this really loose watercolour beach painting. It's a seascape with a beautiful blue sky and just the cloud shadows reflected in the water and just a little bit of white on the waves as they roll into shore. I'm starting off by roughing in my sketch, which is my roadmap to follow for creating the painting. I'm keeping it really simple, a high horizon line with a sort of distant headland, a sweep of beach with some nice little indications of where I'm going to have some rocks and stones and the sandy texture and maybe a few rock pools. Just a few indications as well of the sort of shape of the waves. I'm going to be painting using the wet in wet technique. I'm using a large wash brush. It's a Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch modeler brush. So I'm going to wet the sky all over and then just wet into the sea. And then I'll wet parts of the beach, leaving a few patches of the beach dry so that I can get some variety to my marks, some soft and some hard edges. I'm using Saunders Waterford cold press watercolour paper. It's taped to my board and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. I'm using a mixture here of ultramarine blue and cobalt blue for my sky colour. Painting around sort of some cloud shapes, leaving the unpainted paper just to create those clouds, so negatively painting around the clouds, allowing the paint to sort of run out on the brush so it becomes quite pale down towards the horizon line. Adding a little bit more stronger paint in the middle so it's slightly darker, more intense blue at the top, coming down to becoming a little bit lighter towards the horizon line. This is a clean, damp, size 20 mop brush, and I'm using this to soften some of my cloud edges. Removing a little bit of paint here and there, and it's important that the brush is only just damp because I don't want to introduce any more water into the sky as it dries, otherwise I might create runbacks. And now I can start off getting some of that same sky colour into the water. So if you notice, I've swapped to horizontal brush strokes and I'm leaving some unpainted areas which will give me the basis of light on the water and my white caps on my waves. Hopefully those can be suggested just by the white of the paper if I can leave them white by the end of the painting. So just to soften a few little patches that I think are a bit too dark, again using this very almost dry, damp brush so that I don't introduce more water into the painting. Now this is a mixture of raw sienna. I've added a bit of sepia to it, and I'll start to get in some of the tones that I want in my headland, starting off with these sort of paler brown tones, using the tips of my modeler brush to drag those, drag paint across the beach, leaving some of it unpainted, dipping into some much darker paint, or richer paint rather, I should say, richer raw sienna as we come closer to the foreground. So I've got a much richer sort of sandy colour there. Trying to keep some variety, adding a few darks. And all the time I'm trying to use my brushwork to suggest the beach. I don't want to overtly paint detail. At the end I want it to look like a beach, but I don't want it to look really detailed or hyper-realistic. A loose painting is just should just suggest the scene and the sort of atmosphere that I'm trying to create of this sort of wild, deserted beach. So building up a little bit of darker tone. I can get these darker values using fairly dry paint now onto the almost dry painting because it's just about dried now. So it's just a few finishing touches here and there, introducing some darker colour in the foreground where I want my rocks and stones to be. and then a nice rich sweep of raw sienna, keeping my brush strokes horizontal. Maybe just a little bit of burnt sienna here and there, just for that slightly warmer, richer glow to guide the eye through the painting. And then dipping into this nice dark colour that's made from sepia and Payne's grey, and just adding a little bit of very dark shadows, deep shadows at the base of the headlands. Still slightly softening and diffusing into the paint there, so I'm not getting it too hard edged, so that it should sort of retain the look of distance. But keeping my brush strokes a lot smaller across there, because then that indicates the distance too. So now I'm using my palette knife to just scrape through the rich damp paint and just reveal a little bit of texture, some highlights, keeping it sort of horizontal again, so that I'm keeping the lay of the land, the lay of the beach nice and flat. And then moving forward and using the palette knife, you could use the corner of a plastic store card, your fingernail, or the end of a paintbrush to scrape through the rocks and stones, and these give me little highlights and the suggestions of the rocks and stones as the palette knife pushes the paint around, and we get the sort of shadows pooling around the edges of that scraped mark. And then once I'm happy with all those effects, I'm going to do a last sweep of raw sienna, quite rich, across that bottom corner, just to really brighten and warm up the foreground. And now I need to leave it all to dry completely. Here's the dry painting, and it's all dried really nicely. I now need to use the wet on dry technique to bring these softly diffused details together. The first thing I'm going to do is to use my 3/4 inch flat brush to darken up the sea. So I'm following really carefully my pale penciled, or my faint pencil horizon line, just using the tips of the flat brush. And this is a mixture of my ultramarine blue, cobalt blue with a little dash of raw sienna, just to darken and warm up the sea colour, give it a slightly sort of greener hue so that it stands out against the paler parts of the sky. This is where the tips of the flat brush come in really handy, keeping the brush strokes again horizontal. I think it's very important if you're painting a large horizontal area like water or land like the beach, keeping these horizontal brush strokes keeps the area nice and flat. You can see I'm painting around the unpainted parts of the sea as well as the paler blue parts in places, and this is straight away through negatively painting around those areas with this different blue. It's giving me a sense of depth and distance, but it's also giving me the look of little wave crests and maybe cloud shadows, light on the water, without me having to paint in any kind of a detailed way. Something in nothing, just suggesting the details. As I come forward, I'm aware to try and keep even more of that unpainted paper showing through. And now to bring a bit more of that blue colour over some of the raw sienna beach and some of the gaps between, using my Mottler brush, and I've added a tiny touch of cerulean blue just to brighten the blue up and bringing it over the sand in places and over my unpainted patches to give me some rock pools. And then it's just a matter of going backwards and forwards across different areas of the painting, just adding a few little details, making a few slight adjustments here and there to bring the painting together. Dragging some dry brush across that area there so that I'm just hitting the texture of the paper, and that gives me a really nice effect of the water just sort of sparkling on the sand. If I just zoom us in a little bit, hopefully you'll be able to see that a bit more clearly, and to see all of the other sort of textures and tones and shapes and suggestions that I've used with my, or created with my brushwork to suggest the scene rather than overtly painting any kind of details. Painting loosely like this can be a little bit tricky to start with. It takes practice. Often you'll find that you think that your paintings look too tight to start with, but there's nothing wrong with that. You have to start off sort of rendering a slightly more detailed look before you can then pare back and have the confidence to begin to paint loosely and using this kind of simplified suggested detail with confidence. So keep practicing and you'll get there. I think I'm just about finished now, so I'm going to remove the tape and have a look at it, see how it looks with its clean white border. But I'm really pleased with this. It's what I wanted it to be, just a really nice loose impressionist painting. Lots of movement in the sky, so that the sky is sort of, the clouds are blowing up over the headland and over the sea, and just enough movement in the water to add life to this painting. Well, I hope you found this demonstration useful, and that there are maybe a few things in here that you can take and use as transferable skills in your own paintings. So many thanks for watching. Please give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and why not subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. It's free to do, and it really lets YouTube know that people are interested in watching our videos and pushes them out to more people. And thank you so much to everyone that supports us on Patreon. We couldn't run the channel without you, and we appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.